CNBC-TV18.
Union Home Minister Amit Shah is holding a high-level meeting on the crisis in Uttarakhand's Joshimath. More than 700 buildings in the town have developed cracks. More than 200 buildings have been marked unsafe to live. Hundreds of people have been evacuated and moved to safer areas. Joshimath is the gateway to the famous pilgrimage sites like Badrinath and is facing a major challenge due to land subsidence. The Uttarakhand Chief Minister has promised a 45 crore rupee rehabilitation package for those affected. But this crisis raises several questions around development and the ecological trade-offs that policymakers make. Joining us now to discuss the current catastrophe and the road forward, Sunita Narian, environmental activist and director at the Centre for Science, joins us. Sunita, always a pleasure. Appreciate you joining us here on the program. The Home Minister holding a special meeting today, a high-level meeting with other ministers and state government officials. The Chief Minister has announced a 45 crore rupee rehabilitation package. Families are being evacuated. Unsafe homes are being demolished. The Minister of State for Defence, while visiting Joshimath, in a conversation with my colleague, my reporter on the ground, said that this is predestined. Let's not focus on the past. Let's talk about the future. You believe that this is a well-engineered calamity. Sunita Narian, explain to our viewers why you say so.
Shireen, the fact is it's not predestined. It's not part of our destiny to have towns and sink under us and such havoc and such tragedy. This is clearly because we have just not understood that when we plan for a fragile region like the Himalayas, we have to plan differently than what I keep saying, a parking lot in Greater Kailash. We don't seem to be able to understand when we are doing the planning and the execution. We understand it in theory, but not when it comes to actually on the ground, that these are the youngest mountain ranges in the world. They are ecologically very fragile, very vulnerable, made even more vulnerable because of climate change today. And we have a situation where we are building hydroelectric projects literally back to back. We are doing unplanned construction without any thinking about what would it mean for water supply, for the sewage that flows and weakens the mountains. We are doing roads. We need to build roads, but we need to build roads keeping in mind that every cost will need to be spent in making sure that it doesn't make the Himalayas more vulnerable. So we just don't, we cannot talk about this as destiny, but yes, I would agree with the minister. Let's talk about the future, which really means let's not keep making the same mistake again.
Yes, let's talk about the future, Sunita Narian. And, I want to take you back to 2013 because you have recounted your own experience of sitting on a committee that was entrusted with looking at hydroelectric projects and how these projects should be taken forward. You yourself pointed out that no one is questioning that there should be development or infrastructure should be built out. Yes, we need better infrastructure, but we need to balance the needs of the economy with the needs of the ecology as well. Now, in your experience, what seems to be the problem while clearing these projects?
It's mindless. Shireen, I cannot use a politer word. It's completely mindless. See, I'm an environmentalist who's actually in favor of hydroelectric projects. I believe very strongly that hydroelectricity is one, a renewable source. It is a clean source. More than that, it is one economic benefit that you get out of the Himalayas. People of the Himalayas should get the first right to the electricity and should use the electricity for economic growth. No question about it. The point that I was making to the committee, we had the number of projects were about 70 odd projects, 9,000 megawatt that is on the table and that is being built. When it was in the committee in 2013, there was a moratorium. And there was a question about how do we move ahead. When I looked at the projects, we did a very detailed exercise looking at the energy generated from the projects as well as the water flow in the river. The engineers had argued that by building these projects, 70 odd projects, they would re-engineer the entire river. 80% of the flow of the river would be re-engineered. Also, they said that they were planning to use up 90% of the water of the river, which means that there would be a base flow of only 10%. My argument was that if you were to relook at the projects and come back to say, let's mimic the river flow. When the river has more water, let's plan to utilize it for energy. When the river does not have water, let's not plan to utilize it. Let the river flow. And given that, it would mean that a large number of projects, including the one that is the reason why this tragedy, the Tapovan Vishnu Ghati project, is the one that should have never been built. It would have been cancelled. But clearly that's not a convenient message. So we've gone ahead, moratorium or not, it keeps getting lifted. Almost the same 9,000 projects, 9,000 megawatt for 70 projects is being done. Now this is the Himalayas. This is what I'm saying. You cannot pit this of development versus environment. This is mindless development. This is completely mindless. This is not about the conflict between environment and development. If you had a serious plan which was cognizant of the region, then you can call it, and there was a problem with environment, then I'll be able to say, here is a problem between environment and development. But this is mindless. This is completely, if I can build, I will build anywhere. This is thinking about Greater Kailash parking lot. Nothing less than that.
Well, you know, the Greater Kailash parking lot itself is a catastrophe, Sunita Narian, so let's not even go there. But you know, since we are now talking about what needs to be done from here on, and as you and many other experts are suggesting that it is probably not going to end at Joshimath, we are going to see similar such incidents, and hopefully we are able to put our house in order. But what is the next step? At least as far as Joshimath is concerned, in the immediate term, families are being evacuated. Construction has been banned, at least on paper. What do you believe needs to be prioritized as the next steps, the lessons to be learnt from this?
So I think the most important next step, Shireen, I'm sure the our administrations are very good at crisis management. I don't need to give them any suggestions on what they should do in Joshimath. But I would basically argue that as far as the future is concerned, I think the most telling thing of Joshimath is how we don't seem to have a governance system where expert opinions are either accounted for, or we have a situation where experts have basically become so compliant that they don't seem to understand the need for more complex, nuanced decision-making. And I think unless we can correct that, I don't see anything changing, because every time we have a project like this, we put it within this very simplistic prism of development versus environment. And then we say, oh, development must go ahead, environment we'll protect some trees, we'll regrow some trees, we'll transplant some trees, you know, we will manage the environment. But this is not about environment versus development. This is about planning about development itself. And I think that's the real crisis, which is not going to go away unless we really take seriously the need for ecologically appropriate planning for different regions of India, and we make experts accountable for the advice they give governments. I mean, who in the scientific bodies are being held accountable for the advice they gave for building all the 9,000 megawatt plants? Who? Nobody. Because all experts basically sit in committees, closed-door committees, and we have no clue whether they even voice an opinion or they just nod their heads and say whatever anybody else wants to listen to.
No, you know, I think you make a very valid point there, Sunita Narian, and I do hope that through the course of this discussion, we do offer the viewers a different lens by which to look at this debate, because this debate, as you point out, this false narrative between the environment and development, this conflict, this narrative needs to change, and we need to look at what is appropriate, as you point out, for different regions. Sunita, before I let you go, you know, you have, of course, cautioned, as have many others, that we are likely to see this happen in the future as well. Now, at this point in time, as the government does its stock taking, which areas, which regions do you believe are most vulnerable, where some preemptive action perhaps should be taken at this point in time?
Shireen, quite honestly, nobody knows. I think this is where government needs to now get deploy its full resources. There are huge institutions in Uttarakhand itself. There's the Roorkee University, IIT Roorkee. There's the Wadia Institute of Geology. Amazing people there. I think what government needs to do is a really open, clear planning. My only request would be try and make it public if you can, so that everyone can comment, they know. Because, you know, this whole issue about vulnerability, also the fear of people, and also the fact that people are really feeling that they may get shortchanged in this. So, you know, what is scary, and I'm sure you have also seen, and it, you know, is the fact that people have houses which are collapsing, but they won't allow the administration to break them down, because they are worried about what it means for them. Can you imagine what tragedy a human being is going through, where they know that that house is going to collapse, but they will not let it get broken down because they want a compensation rate that was fixed, and quite rightly so, for Badrinath. And they're saying, if you paid that much for Badrinath, what not for us? But this could also lead to a huge issue for the state. How many people can it compensate? How many people can it rehabilitate? Where is the land for rehabilitation, Shireen? So I think huge challenge, but it needs to be taken up with the seriousness it deserves. I'm sure the state government will. They will get their act together on this. But my only plea is that, please, let's not really fall into this trap between environment and development. Let's really understand the fragility of our regions and the need to plan appropriately. And that if somebody says that the carrying capacity has limits, then it's not because they are a crazy environmentalist, but because they know that the science tells them that this region cannot sustain the same pressure that any other region perhaps can. I mean, the Aravallis are hard rock regions. You can do things differently there. The Sahyadris are older mountain ranges. Not that you can go and rip them apart, but each part of India has to be planned for differently, keeping in mind its own ecological infrastructure before you do physical infrastructure.
Sunita Narian, as you point out, this is going to be an issue that requires all stakeholders to come together. This is going to be a complex issue, the issue of rehabilitation, the issue of moving people, 700 families at first count that need to be rehabilitated just in Joshimath at this point in time. It requires nuanced conversation and it requires urgent action and intervention. Always a pleasure. Appreciate you joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Sunita Narian of the CSC. Time for us to head into a break, but up next, Auto Giants showcase their new launches at the Auto Expo 2023. A special report when we return. It is day 2 of the Grand Auto Show, and car makers unveil their pipeline and offerings. Maruti Suzuki unveiling the compact SUV Fronx and the off-roader Jimny, which will go on sale by mid-2023. Tata Motors showcasing the electric vehicle Harrier SUV. Other brands like Cummins Ultraviolet, Lexus and Liger also revealed their wares. Parikshit Luthra and Danishandan bring us all the highlights.
Maruti Suzuki has launched 2 new products here at the Auto Expo to boost its SUV lineup. This is the 4th SUV in Maruti's stable. The Jimny, the 5-door Jimny, has finally been launched at the Auto Expo. This comes with the ladder frame chassis, washer headlamps, intuitive knobs with muscle memory on the inside. The seats can recline completely, a lot of connected car features. This is an adventure off-roader with the 4x4 capability. It will take on other vehicles in the segment, such as the Thar. If you remember the Maruti Gypsy, which was loved in India over 3 decades, well, Maruti is trying to fill the void in its portfolio after the production of Gypsy was stopped. On this side, you have the Fronx, which is a compact SUV that has also been under development for some time. This will take on the likes of the Kia Sonet and the Hyundai Venue as well. So Maruti really hoping that now with these 2 vehicles, they'll have 5 SUVs in their portfolio and they will be able to boost their SUV market share as well. The bookings for these products have begun and the prices will be announced later this year. But both these vehicles are expected to hit the markets in the next few months.
the SUV space in India is growing very, very fast. And we understand that we need more and more appealing products for the young and vibrant Indian consumers.
I think we will see good part of these vehicles getting introduced in next few years, right? So for example, the ones which will find it easier are of course battery electric, because the technology is developed there.
The consumers are willing to experiment, the consumers are willing to express, and they know that you have only one life to live.
Along with the e-platform gives you that advantage of being the pure electric vehicle in the country, which we have, and which gives you an advantage in terms of range, in terms of efficiency, in terms of longer life for the car.
Well, that's the day 2 of the Auto Expo. The big tech numbers today. Infosys reporting a beat on its top line in Q3. Margins were a slight miss. However, the biggest takeaway is that the company has revised its FY23 revenue growth guidance higher from 15 to 16% to 16 to 16.5%. Rima is here with the details. Strong showing there from Infosys. Rima.
Infosys is a beat. The revenue growth has come in at 2.2% higher in dollar terms. Constant currency revenue growth at 2.4% ahead of consensus expectation and ahead of its closest peer TCS as well. Margins are a bit of a miss because margins are flat on a sequential basis at 21.5%. So the benefit of rupee depreciation has not reflected in the company's margins. The street was working with a margin expansion. The big positive is the deal wins. Deal wins at $3.3 billion compares with $2.7 billion in the prior quarter and the best that we've seen in the last 8 quarters. And one of the reasons is vendor consolidation and the company winning market share when it comes to vendor consolidation. The revenue guidance for the full year has increased. The earlier guidance was 15 to 16%. It now stands at 16 to 16.5%. Which means an upward revision of 75 basis points at the midpoint. And this roughly assumes about a 3.5% revenue growth in Q4, which means Q4 growth is going to be solid as well. The margin guidance for the full year remains unchanged at 21 to 22%. So overall, as I said, revenues beat, deal wins strong. FY23 revenue guidance has been upgraded, coming in as a positive surprise. And attrition too has ticked down by nearly 300 basis points. What would be the misses in the numbers? Margins, as I said, margins are flat. The street was hoping for some margin improvement. We saw margin improvement in the case of TCS as well. That's not played out. 2, the financial sector, or BFSI as it's called, has grown slower than the company average. BFSI's revenue growth this quarter stands at 5.5% on a year-on-year basis, which compares with the 13.5% growth that the company has reported. It basically means the financial sector has seen a bit of a degrowth in Q3, and that is a bit of a miss. And hiring numbers are also fairly muted at 1,600. It's not a decline in the headcount, as in the case of TCS, but it's still a muted hiring number of 1,600 employees. This is the lowest that we've seen in the last couple of quarters.
Rima, many thanks. And Ritu caught up with Infosys CEO Salil Parekh. Here's that exclusive conversation.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. First, on your revenue guidance, the reason for the revision, while you're talking about a slower growth, a difficult macro environment, and also what this would mean for the fourth quarter now that you revise the guidance up. Does that imply like a lower 0.5% kind of a growth, a muted fourth quarter?
So on the guidance, we've had a very strong large deals win for Q3, and we've had very strong growth in the quarter, 13.7%. Keeping those factors in mind, and also looking at the points where some of our industries we are seeing a different economic environment. For example, in financial services, in mortgages or investment banking, in telco, in high tech, retail, so on. Keeping all of those factors in mind, we've increased the guidance. Specifically on Q4, we don't provide a quarterly view of that. We only have an annual guidance.
That's right, but the implication is because you revised up the guidance for the rest of the year, will we see a bit of a muted growth? And also, if you could comment on, the EBIT margin, you expect to be at the lower end of what you guided?
On the Q4, so first, with the change in the guidance, typically Q3 and Q4 are seasonally weak quarters for Infosys in any case. So those factors still continue. On the margin, we had a very good operating margin in Q3 at 21.5. We've kept the guidance, which was narrowed to 21 to 22. We've kept it at that level. And we've also I made the statement in the comments earlier, it'll be at the lower end of the guidance.
You know, while you do not give any guidance for the following year, FY24, what is the feedback you're getting from clients amid, the macro trends that we're seeing? There were large deal wins. You won 32 large deals in the quarter. Will that kind of a deal win rate continue?
So our pipeline for large deals is strong today. We have two engines of growth really. One is on digital and cloud, and one is on automation and cost efficiency. So depending on how the environment changes, and it's different industry by industry, we feel that we are well positioned to sort of help our clients in both dimensions. So we continue to see that as the approach ahead.
And you've already flagged off certain sectors where you expect some sort of weakness: high-tech, telecom, retail, and now also BFSI. How long do you expect that to continue, and when do you expect things to improve?
So we've not put a time frame on that. We've more talked about what we've seen in Q3. And as things evolve in either direction, we'll start to talk about it.
How do we read your hiring figures? You'd guided for 50,000 fresh hirings for the year. You're at close to 46 now, but it has come down quarter on quarter. Are you expecting a slower growth? Should we read it as that?
So there again, we don't have any view that we share on the growth for FY24. Our focus really is on the guidance and the growth for this year, which will end in March.
All right. And attrition is now at a 5-quarter low. Do you expect that trend to sustain, or has that been a one-off?
Attrition, as you point out, is going down every quarter for us. There were several policies that we put in place, several changes, much more aligned with the employee expectations, their career development, their training. And many of those things, I believe, are helping us with a very sharp 6-point reduction in attrition this quarter, but also in the previous quarters.
And a final word on margins as well. Despite this kind of rupee depreciation, margins have remained flat. Any outlook you could give us for the coming quarters?
On the margin, I think we have the guidance for this financial year. But beyond that, we don't have a guidance for the next financial year on the margin.
All right. Thank you very much.
Well, that is Salil Parikh speaking to Ritu Singh about the quarter gone by and, of course, what the future looks like for Infosys. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Newscenter. Stay tuned to CNBC-TV18. We've got a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a minute.